Now, I'll go through the first one with relatively little help, but with the next ones, I'll be calling on people. So make sure you're following along. Unless you've completed the notes, then of course, just I can give you a pass. All right. So supply the missing reasons in each proof. So given that BO is congruent to CO and AO is congruent to DO. Okay. I know I said I wouldn't necessarily pick on people yet, but what's the first thing we should do with that information? What should we do? What's that? Let's mark up the diagram. So we have that BO is congruent to CO. So let's mark that down. And if you want, you can use some color too. BO is congruent to CO, and AO is congruent to DO. AO is congruent to DO. Let's use a different color for those two congruencies. They want us to prove that angle B is congruent to angle C. Now, one of the ways that we've been working on proving congruency is using corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Well, we can see here that these are both going to be corresponding sides. We know that because each angle is made up of the non-colored angle and the green line, right? The non-colored line and the green line. So B and C must be corresponding angles. So if we can prove that the two triangles are congruent, then we know that those angles are congruent. Well, looking at this, we have two pieces of information, right? So we need a third. And we'll walk through this and we'll see what that third is. But I want you to be thinking in your head, what is that third piece of information that we might need? Keep in mind, the options we have are side, angle, side, 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 and angle, side, angle. So I would consider what two pieces of information we have now and see what would be the most easy thing to find. Yes, Jay? Not yet. Okay? Keep that in mind. Now, BO is congruent to CO and AO is congruent to DO. Well, that's just given. Now, the next statement, Jade, what were you going to say? Vertical angles. Okay, we know that these two angles are congruent because they are vertical angles. Well, that's what the next statement says. AOB is congruent to DOC. That's because of they are vertical angles. Vertical angles is the theorem.
No, but I'm saying, like, if there's something and you know that it's really, you just write it out and be like...
It's better than believing a blank. Next, triangle ABO is congruent to triangle DCO. Well, how do we know that? What pieces of information do we have? We have two sides and an angle. Well, we only have one possible way that could work is if the two sides sandwich the angle. So Jacob? Side, angle, side. And you have to double check that both triangles are side, angle, side. Side, angle, side. Okay? So that's because of side, angle, side. And B is congruent to C because of congruent parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Okay? All right, next piece. Okay? We're given that SR is congruent to UT and that SR is parallel to UT and that angle S is congruent to angle U. Right, and Melina, what should we do first? Mark up the information they gave us, right? So they told us that SR is congruent to UT, so I can put that, I can mark that up. I can also use a highlighter so it's really clear. Okay, that those two are congruent to each other. then they also tell me that SR is parallel to UT. So I can mark that. I'm going to use a different color here, but I can use my arrows to mark that. So now we have both those pieces of information. Right? And they tell us that angle S is congruent to angle U. So we know that this angle here is congruent to this angle here. Now, we have two pieces of information. We need a third.
We have three.
No, we don't. Well, we have three pieces, but only one of them actually gets us there, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, why do you think they told us that those two lines were parallel? Rubina?
So you can find like corresponding angles like 1 and 4.
Okay. Take a look at 1 and 4. Guys, if they tell you that two lines are parallel, we can find out information about the angles, right? Now, if we look at 1 and 4, if these are our parallel lines and we extend them out, okay, well, 1 is corresponding to 4. So we know that those are congruent. So we want to keep that in mind because that's going to be used in the proof later. Okay? And we can maybe put a mark there that we know that, and maybe make a note that that's because of corresponding angles. So the first statement is just given. The second statement, Krishna? Second statement, angle 1 is congruent to angle 4. What did we say that was? Corresponding angles. Okay. Now, triangle RST is congruent to TUV. Triangle RST is congruent to TUV. How do I know that? How many sides do we have information on? I only see one. We know that SR is congruent to UT. Okay. Akil?
Use angle side and
So we know two angles, right? We know that these two angles are congruent, S and U, and 1 and 4 are congruent. And do they have a side right in between them? Anna, do you agree? They have a side in between them? Yeah, it goes side, angle, side. So here we have side, angle, side. Now, the next one, number 4, says that angle 3 is congruent to angle 2. Angle 3 is congruent to angle 2. Well, let's go through real quick. Yeah, Elena?
I'm confused on this angle.
We know that these are congruent here, and that these are congruent. So we have angle, side, angle. Oh, sorry. Thank you. That would be why it's confusing, because it was wrong. Thanks for calling me out on that. Now, how do we know that angle 3 and angle 2 are congruent? Well, we said here that R is congruent, or R and T come first, right? So what do we know about those sides? Starts with a C? What is that, Jacob? They're corresponding. So I'm going to go and highlight both R and T. Okay. And let me see here. Right. And what about S and U? Devin? What do we know about S and U, do you think? That they're... Come back to you for the next one, okay? All right? Someone help them out? What do we got? Rebecca? What do we know about S and U? They're corresponding. Both of them come second, right? So if they both come second, then they correspond to each other. They're related. Okay? What about T and V? What are those ones? They're corresponding. So they're related to each other. They're pretty much the same thing. Oops, I did that wrong. Did I? Oh, so T and V are also corresponding. Now, if you notice, T shows up twice. Okay, in there. Now, what do we know about corresponding parts of congruent triangles? What are they? Come on, everyone. What are they?
Congruent.
Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So, angle 3 is T, and angle 2 is V. Well, T and V are corresponding, so they are. This is corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Next one, ST is parallel to UV. How do we know that? Well, we're trying to prove that ST is parallel to UV, right? So let's highlight those up. We got ST here, and we got UV right here. ST and UV. Take a look at that for a sec. We're trying to show that those two are parallel. Now, if they were parallel, what would we know about about any corresponding angles that they have? They're congruent. Can you see any corresponding angles just looking at those green lines? You start with 2, okay? What other line do we need to make up 2? We need this bottom line, right? Yeah. Okay. We have 2 here. That's on the inside of the 2 parallel lines, right? Do we have anything on the outside? Hey guys, is 4 on the inside or the outside? Inside. Is 3 on the inside or the outside? So, well, then why were you guys saying you're all quiet when I asked if there was one on the outside? Hey?
The outside. On the inside.
3's on the outside?
3's on the inside.
3's on the inside of the 2 green lines.
Yeah. No, wait. Oh, no. I thought you were saying it's a triangle.
Okay? We're just talking about the we're trying to prove these 2 are parallel, right?
Yeah.
So we want to know if these are corresponding angles. Are those corresponding angles?
Yeah.
2 and 3? Yeah. Are they congruent?
Yeah.
What does the statement right before say? Yeah, they are. So, this one is the converse of the corresponding angles postulate. Okay? Now, if you don't know that particular piece, what can you write? Write that if corresponding angles are congruent, then the lines are parallel. If you write that, that's what the definition says, or the postulate says. I'm fine with it.
What does it say right there? What's the first word?
Converse of the corresponding angles postulate. Corresponding angles postulate simply states that if you have 2 parallel lines, corresponding angles are congruent. The converse is the opposite.